Welcome to episode 27 of 22 Man Game with Jared and Dame. I'm Jared. That's Damon. It's been a while, but here we are. March 8th, 5:33 p.m. on the eve of the legal tampering period or the dawn of free agency. Damon, how are you doing on this fine pre-free agency evening?
I'm doing all right, Jared. It's been a long month or so since we recorded, maybe a little shorter than that, but I had the Super Bowl, talked about the Super Bowl, and then I had surgery right before the Super Bowl, so I was recovering from that, and I'm now fine. We've been playing disc golf. That has been a fun activity we picked up in recent weeks. Um, so yeah, I'm sitting here, just did some predictions we'll get to later. And I can't complain, all is well. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I feel like it's really been a sea change to have this disc golf starting to become a regular routine for us, but it's been a blast. And otherwise, I had my family in town for a little while. And yeah, settling into a bit more of a rhythm with work. My schedule's been pretty consistently full, and I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. I feel like I've had some nice things in my corner of late, and I'm thankful for that. So, uh, it has been a while since we recorded. That is certainly for sure. Whole combine we missed, and a lot of measurements for players. Obviously, those are eye popping, but oftentimes it's comments from GMs and coaches that make that more immediately pressing, especially as we are now rounding the corner into a free agency period that I would say already has a lot of juice with all the trades going on. Would you agree?
Yeah, a lot has happened before the free agency has technically kicked off, which is surprising to me. And obviously this year I'm following the NFL closer than I ever have before with the show. But I feel like I'm not used to this amount of activity happening so early on in the NFL offseason.
Yeah, I think teams definitely got ahead of the curve with their exchanging of players, exchanging of picks before the league year even starts on Wednesday. Um, if you're new to the National Football League and how it operates, yes, there is a legal tampering period. The illegal tampering period started the second the season ended. So
Hmm.
don't be surprised at noon on Monday, I believe, is when that news starts coming in, that there are going to be immediate negotiations and signings during the legal tampering period and at the official start of free agency.
Yeah, yeah, somehow at 12:01 p.m., they've already come to an agreement with a full deal contract in hand, even though the it's been 1 minute.
Yeah. Every year there's typically one or two guys who are announced as signing with one team and then end up with another. Typically among the higher profile guys that happened last year with the Patriots nose tackle where their name has slipped through the sands of time. I was just talking about this person the other day.
Patriots nose tackle,
The
Milton
the guy they
Williams.
signed last year, Milton
Milton
Williams.
Williams.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Milton Williams was announced to be signing with the Panthers. Ends up with the Patriots, who outbid the Panthers at the last. So, um, until it's locked and loaded, stay on your toes. But before we get to all our thoughts on free agency, we've picked roughly 10 players and where we think they're going to end up a piece. We want to get through the news that we missed, or at the very least, the highlights, or in this case, lowlights of what we missed. Damon, you want to start us off with some of the difficult news we received in the last month or so from the football world?
Yeah, so this one caught me off guard for sure. Former receiver Rondale Moore passed away. That was back February 21st. As far as I understood when it came out, there was no sort of like causation or anything like that. I think their family is, keeping it close to the chest, which makes sense. They want their privacy. I have not further dug into it because, again, I'm not going to try to figure out something if it's not supposed to be figured out. But obviously, he was younger than me, I think. So pretty young guy to have passed away from whatever it was. Obviously, never a good thing. So, wish nothing but the best for his family and loved ones as they kind of get through this difficult time.
Yeah, just looking up his age here. He is about he was a few months older than I was when he passed, so very young and difficult to see and obviously connecting the dots a little bit, we have to wonder about how playing in the NFL might, affect someone's mental health if that's a factor, or physical well-being and things like that. Um, and yeah, it's unfortunate. And Kyle Pitts called out most of the league for not really showing up to his service recently. I haven't read too much into that, but I noticed that criticism was being passed around there. In Also terrible news, but more about a player's behavior. Rashee Rice's ex-girlfriend filed a civil lawsuit for repeated assaults against her in an 18-month span from 2023 to 2025. And during some of that time, she was pregnant. So reflects really poorly on a player who already has a history of misconduct throughout his young career in the league. And unfortunately, I think he's too high profile a player and too essential to the Chiefs' uh, sort of relevance to receive real accountability. And whether that's because of his skill, because the NFL protects his own, or some combination of both, I'm very pessimistic that there's going to be real accountability for Rashee Rice from the league.
Yeah, we've seen this time and time again, players that have real life things happen, and then, if the court of law doesn't sentence him guilty for whatever and jail time, then the NFL doesn't really do anything either, which granted, the NFL is not is not lawmaking, so I guess I understand to an extent, but obviously when your players if anything in here is even remotely true, there should be some sort of consequence handed down.
And just as a reminder, teams were unwilling to sign Colin Kaepernick after he openly protested the anthem, but I doubt we're going to see Rashee Rice released anytime soon. So just something that I was kind of thinking about as we were talking about this here, the double standard. Um, Justin Tucker should not be on an NFL roster. But the reason he's not on an NFL roster is because he's not a good enough kicker to overcome the stigma and the criminality of his actions. And I think the hypocrisy will unfortunately continue to shine through here. Uh, but we're going to transition. We're going to move on. There's a lot to be said there, but there is a ton that's been going on. So we want to continue keeping the ball rolling, and maybe in a slower period of the offseason, kind of rest and reflect on some of the larger trends in the league and its interaction with real world issues. For now, worth mentioning that the NFL Competition Committee is discussing potentially authorizing replay officials to throw flags for specific penalties after watching the replay, which historically you can watch the replay to assess certain aspects of the game, but a missed penalty can't then be enforced based solely on replay. But that may be changing right now. So, uh, what do you think of that rule change?
It's bad. It makes it slow, I think. It'll make it too slow if we have to wait for replay to assess penalties after the fact. And I think, in all likelihood, it's commonly said that there's probably a penalty on every NFL play. I feel like that is pretty much true. You can probably always find a holding, a pass interference, something like that. So if we're gonna, I guess it depends on exactly what kind of flags, because they said it was specific penalties. Maybe if they're assessing, like, if they look at, somebody like do a little shove or something and they want to throw an unsportsmanlike after the game or something, and a fine or something like that, you know what I mean? Like that kind of makes sense. But anything that
Mhm.
disrupts the game flow wouldn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, I wonder if I mean, yeah, I think it's a slippery slope. In the sense of like, okay, can you penalize next game for the actions of the previous game? I don't think you want to do that. And I remember listening to a show, one of Bill Barnwell's shows, I think like a year and a half ago, a while ago. And they were talking about the idea that certain penalties coming with automatic first downs is too costly. And I think they're addressing the wrong side of the problem with this. If there are penalties so significant that they completely alter the course of a game, instead of
Hmm.
making those reviewable so you can throw them, you should probably make them less directly impactful on the course of the game. Because yes, there are certain behaviors like, yeah, pass interference maybe should be a spot foul, um, but maybe we eliminate all automatic first downs on penalties, right? So you prevent a situation where whatever penalty you're evaluating suddenly determines the game. And if they weren't reviewing another aspect of the play, then they can't necessarily do that. And do coaches start using BS challenges just to get people to look at the play so then they see the
Hmm.
penalty on replay? Like, it just seems like we are giving the penalties too much power, such that now reviewing them becomes essential because missing a penalty is such a big impact on the game. So just feels a little bit misguided to me as well. Not a guaranteed change. We'll see if they end up coming down with that or not, but gonna have an impact on the league. I could see this being something they try in preseason and then maybe reevaluate whether they want to roll it out for the season.
Yeah, feels like the start of a slippery slope. Um, okay, let's look at some front office things that have occurred since last episode. This is probably I feel like we're pretty much done here with the coordinators and coaches kind of being put in place for the most part. Um, First thing, Broncos head coach Sean Payton giving up play calling duties to Denver's new offensive coordinator Davis Webb, who was their QB coach, had some head coaching jobs, some other coordinator jobs, ultimately stuck with the Broncos. And this was kind of a big deal because Sean Payton famously loves calling plays. So, do you have any specific takes on that?
This signals to me that I imagine Davis Webb was probably offered a play calling offensive coordinator position with another team, and in order to keep Webb in the building, you have to give him play calling. That would be my guess. I wonder also if this might be in reaction to things that are happening behind the scenes during the season. Maybe Peyton feels he needs to be more hands-on, and kind of more able to address certain issues during a game. But to me, this reads as we made the most competitive offer we could to keep Davis Webb in our building for another year, before he almost inevitably moves on to a head coaching position at some point based on how he's been discussed as a coordinator. I think if they have a strong year on offense or even a capable year on offense, Webb is probably out the door.
Yeah, that's fair. I would agree with that. Sticking in the AFC West, the Raiders promoting defensive line coach Rob Leonard to be their new defensive coordinator. And they're hiring Seahawks QB coach Andrew Janako, probably Janako, as their new offensive coordinator. Of course, Clint Kubiak was the offensive coordinator over there in Seattle, so he takes his QB coach with him over here to the Raiders.
Yeah, I remember reading at the time speculation that they promoted Rob in part because he had a close connection to Maxx Crosby, which if so, that did not pan out.
Yeah.
I imagine, I think he's good at connecting with the players, and it is interesting because when you have a first time head coach, you often want that person surrounded by more experienced coaches, whether that comes in the form of a former head coach or, on defense, you get the experienced coordinator. I think we saw that with Ben Johnson in Chicago, with Dennis Allen last year. And so to promote an experienced defensive coordinator and then bring in your QB coach to become the OC
All
feels,
new.
yeah, feels a little risky for this Raiders team. That shows a lot of confidence in Clint as the head coach, but they're not expected to be competitive this coming year, so maybe
Hmm.
you have an opportunity to get some kind of bumps and bruises. And I wonder if targeting a QB coach is also bearing in mind the fact that they're likely going to be bringing along Fernando Mendoza as a young QB. So the Seahawks made a hire to replace Clint Kubiak, hiring 49ers tight end coach Brian Fleury. Fleury, Fleury for the listener.
Who
Uh,
knows?
Yeah, I don't have a strong take on this personally. Not a name that I've
Nah.
seen floated around. Um,
George Kittle's good. I can tell you that.
that
But
is
that
that is
that,
true.
that just could be George Kittle. So,
Jake Tonges had a nice fill
yeah,
in
yeah.
for Kittle, and Jake Tonges may come up later in our show, which I say
Oh God.
mostly to haunt Damon because based on the topic of
Oh
what we're
no.
discussing, there's no reason Jake Tonges should be mentioned. Um, there's a couple other DCs, Damon. Take us through 'em.
Yeah, yeah. A couple other OCs too. The Rams promoted QB
Ah,
coach Nate Shieldhaas?
I
No
think
clue.
Shieldhaas sounds right to me.
Shieldhaas to be their new offensive coordinator. Jared. Quiz time. This means there are now how many OCs of color in the National Football League?
Offensive coordinators of color.
Yes, sir.
Confident it's fewer than five.
Okay.
Concerned it's fewer than three. Is it like two? Is it
It's
two
three.
guys?
It's three.
Three? Who are the
Well,
three?
two that I claim. Three, three technically.
Oh, Mike McDaniel's one.
Michael Cagle's one that I don't claim. Nate, of course, is the second. The third one's also a new guy, returning to a role that he previously had with this team,
Returning to a role that he previously had with
with the team that he
this
hasn't
team,
on.
with the
Yeah.
team that he has.
So he
So
was
going
on another
back to
team, came back to this organization to take on this
oh,
role.
Eric Bieniemy. Eric
Eric
Bieniemy.
Bieniemy, yes. Those are it. They're all new. They're all new to their position. All right. We are shoot
I
under 10% POC offensive coordinators in the NFL. Tough, tough.
yeah. And offensive coordinators are most often in demand for head coaching positions, so that does not bode well for the head coaching level either.
Yep. Yep.
Miserable, miserable. The Browns hired Falcons DC, or sorry, Falcons defensive passing game coordinator Mike Rutenberg as their new defensive coordinator. So Falcons DPGC Mike Rutenberg to their new defensive coordinator. Um,
I don't know who that is. So,
yeah, on Raheem Morris's defensive staff, known as a defensive coach. So maybe that speaks well to him.
uh,
I know Damon, you are a Raheem Morris fan, so
I
I'm sure
am.
you'll be
And
putting
he's
the
just
root
out
in
there.
Rutenberg. Yep.
Just out
I
there
thought he
doing nothing.
attached to the Rams again. Am I wrong?
You could
I'm
be
looking it
right.
up. I'm
I
looking
just
it up.
probably didn't see it.
Oh,
Well,
defensive coordinator for the Niners, Raheem Morris.
oh, I did know that. We talked about that.
I'm sure.
We probably did. The Patriots linebacker coach Zach Kerr, who was interim defensive coordinator last year, is being promoted to full-time defensive coordinator. So he was the interim when their defensive coordinator was out on leave with that cancer diagnosis that he was away from the team from for so long. The name escapes me. What was
That's
it? I was going to say Terrell Williams, but
yeah,
that's
Terrell
just,
Williams. Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
money. The brain is cooking. Um, so yeah, he's still away from the team. So now Zach Kerr is going to take on those duties full time. I suppose they thought he did a good enough job that he made it to the Super Bowl. So who's to say they're wrong?
Yeah. Definitely, I think earned the promotion, and Terrell Williams remains on staff as a high-ranking defensive assistant. Last bit of executive news, then we're going to start sliding straight into the pure football action. Lions president and CEO Rod Wood has announced his retirement. I think Wood really endeared himself to the franchise during the Dan Campbell era. He'd always love to go chat up Dan during training camp, give him some fist bumps. And it was clear that he was passionate and invested in the leadership team that we've brought in this time around. I believe he served in the role for 10 to 11 years. I think there's probably a few internal candidates who we may circle. Um, there hasn't been a lot of reporting about potential replacements for Wood. Fortunately, this isn't a position that necessarily has a ton of sway in the football arena. It's more about the sort of management of the team. He was instrumental in bringing the draft to Detroit a few years back, and I have a lot of respect for the way he ended his tenure. So, um, sad to see him go. Happy for him that he gets to retire, and looking forward to see who is going to shepherd the Lions brand next under the watchful eye of Sheila Ford Hamp.
There's rumors that it's Jared Smith, but we'll see.
Yeah, I would say that I am confidently underqualified. Having applied for jobs in this climate, that would be quite a surprise. If I got that call back, I'll tell you what. Um, all right, let's move on to some trade news. Starting with news that is not about a trade, but is about a trade that may, but I'm skeptical will happen. Colts are allowing QB Anthony Richardson to seek a trade.
Mm,
Okay.
yes, sir. Who could use Anthony Richardson? Some teams, I'm sure.
I wonder if Green Bay looks at Richardson with sort of like the big athletic mobile profile as a potential replacement for Malik Willis this offseason if they can get him for a late round pick or if he's cut by the Colts. They seemed to like having Willis as that kind of profile of backup, and I wonder if they go in a similar direction with Richardson.
Or like Mariota goes somewhere and he goes to the Commanders.
Yeah, yep, that's a good pull as well. I I think if you're a team that is aspiring to win a championship, I would not have Anthony Richardson as my backup. If Miami loses out on a guy like Malik Willis, I wouldn't hate having him somewhere in the quarterback room just to see if you can get a little bit more out of him. But I don't think he's going to be someone that a team signs or trades for and expects to be their week one starter.
You don't want the New
Um,
York Jets to have Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields competing for the week one job.
that would be a phenomenal tanking move. If you're just like, we don't want to win this season, just go get Anthony Richardson and see if he turns into a miraculous starter, and otherwise just crash and burn.
Yeah.
What about these Vikings here? Vikings making a potential move.
These Vikings are open to trading edge Jonathan Grenard. Ultimately, they'll probably just cut or release him, but he's a really good player, so they wanted to see if they could get something. They have not got something as of yet, but this comes with some moves we'll talk about later. A bunch of cuts they made to free up roster space because or cap space rather, because their cap was not in a good situation. So, despite the talent, I think they're just trying to clear up some room here.
Yeah, no doubt. There's been a lot of restructuring by the Vikings front office in recent days. And there have been a number of trades, though, some small, some shocking. Uh, we'll start with a couple player for player trades. The Packers send defensive tackle Colby Wooden to the Colts for linebacker Zaire Franklin, and the Jets send former first round pick Jermaine Johnson at defensive end to the Titans for defensive tackle Devondre Sweat. Thoughts on either of these moves?
I know Zaire Franklin made a Pro Bowl with the Colts, um, so that's good for the Packers, I think.
Mhm.
And then I don't really know a ton of. I mean, the Jets and Titans, whatever. They're bottom of the barrel teams, so I don't think these moves are gonna swing either of their fates one way or the other.
Yeah, I will say I believe in interior pressure, and I think Devondre Sweat is pretty talented up the middle, and I think it's a nice get for them. And Jermaine Johnson again, first round upside, had a couple nice years with New York under Saleh before Aaron Glenn got there, so some potential I think in that trade. But yes, probably not going to massively affect the win column until these two teams can get their offense in order.
Speaking of the Jets, another AFC East team, the Patriots traded their center Garrett Bradbury, or a center rather, to the Bears for a 2027 fifth round pick. So the Bears are shoring up their center position for this upcoming season. Offensive line was very strong last season. They want to keep it that way. Uh, do you have any takes on that before we move on to the other Bears trade?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and preempt this news here. This came in response to Drew Dolman announcing his retirement at age 27. Signed a 3-year, $42 million deal last offseason. Leaves the team, creates an immediate hole in the center of the O line. So trading for Bradbury seemed to be almost a direct response to that.
Yep.
And 2027 fifth isn't much to give up for a guy that you think can be um, a decent starter on the interior of the offensive line. I have no issue with that move.
Oh. What about the Bears trading wide receiver DJ Moore and a fifth round pick to the Buffalo Bills for a second round pick? How do you feel about that, Jared?
It did happen. My boss was able to gradually convince me over the course of a conversation that DJ Moore is actually much worse than I thought. Um, I will say the fact that you're sending a second round pick out for a 29-year-old wide receiver who is probably at best the wide receiver two on his previous team. Interesting. That argument made to me was pretty persuasive. Even okay, you get the fifth back. Sure, it's a third round value, and it was going to be a low second. Like, I get that. I do think DJ Moore is the highest upside receiver the Bills have brought in, besides Keon Coleman through the draft in the last number of years. Instead, looking at like an Amari Cooper
Hmm.
a couple years back, and then signing guys like Curtis Samuel, now released, and a few other sort of like back of the roster guys. So I appreciate that they're making an appreciable effort to upgrade at the wide receiver position. I feel like this is not the most surefire move, but if you can get back to the DJ Moore from Carolina, this may look like a really solid move.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the idea of like we need to win now, so we need a win now player. We can't wait for a draft guy or try to, have another Keelan Coleman type experience. But a second isn't a lot, like you said, which is why I think it is a very good deal for the Bears, whose receiving room is already pretty crowded now with Rome Odunze, Luther Burden. They took Colson Loveland first round last year, so they already have three guys I think they want to build their passing attack around. And DJ Moore is kind of the odd man out, not really on the timeline with the rest of the team. So ultimately, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, nice call on Loveland. He was totally out of my view there. The Chiefs and the Raiders made the two blockbusters of the week for sure. The Chiefs sent corner Trent McDuffie to the Rams for pick 29 in this year's draft, a fifth, a sixth rounder this year, and a 2027 third round pick. That is a lot of capital for a corner. Um, as my headphones die in real time. But I do think it's interesting to me in the sense that it almost echoes the Jalen Ramsey trade that they made a number of years ago to acquire him. And I'm really curious to see if it's a similar impact on their team. I think it might be a bit of an overpay, personally.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily believe trading outside in for your defense and giving up first round level capital quite makes sense, but I suppose they do have the Falcons first rounder this year, so they'll still be able to get an impact talent at the top of the draft.
Yeah, from what I understand, corner was like the biggest area of need perhaps for this Rams team, who was, you know, a Seattle victory away from maybe winning the Super Bowl. So, it does make sense in terms of like we're one guy away, we think. I hear Trent McDuffie is potentially a top 10, top five corner, and something I was reading a lot after this trade. Some places are pretty high on him. I have such like Chiefs hatred in my eyes that it's hard for me to evaluate their players with a level head.
Yeah.
But if he is that level of player, I think that can be a good end on their defense. I just also wonder, like, was there this huge market for him? Did people know that they were trading him? Probably not. So I do wonder if they could have given up less.
I I have to imagine behind closed doors there had to have been some negotiating against other teams. I mean, honestly, to me, the thing that pushes it over is the third rounder in 27. I just feel like um that's a lot of value. I mean, if you package a third, fifth, and sixth, you would probably get into the second round, right? So roughly a
Hmm.
first and a second um for a position that's just kind of a volatile year to year thing, right? Interceptions are something that create a lot of value but aren't always guaranteed, and pass deflection, same thing. So I uh I think they're following that Ramsey template, but I guess we'll see. What was the Raiders' mind-boggling trade that happened while we were eating dinner after disc golf just the other night?
Yes, it was a nice dinner. The Raiders traded edge Maxx Crosby, who you alluded to with their defensive line coach earlier, having a good relationship with, to the Ravens for their 2026 and 2027 first round picks. So two first round picks for an older edge rusher, but certainly one of the elite edge rushers in the league. It's an interesting trade for me because I do think the Ravens are another team who are like, we're so close. And last year was not the story. I didn't even make the playoffs. But this Lamar kind of Ravens team for the last 5 years has felt close, but not quite there. Perhaps this is a move that can get them closer. Edge rushing was like the weakest spot on their defense for sure, maybe their whole team. So it makes sense who they acquired. Two first round picks. This is a team that's not last year again, but in these next two drafts are probably going to pick in. Well, I guess 2026 is about to happen, but 2027 draft, wouldn't be surprised if it was picked 25 or later. So late first round picks ultimately. So it makes sense on both ends. The Raiders rebuilding, of course, getting two first for a guy like Maxx Crosby makes a lot of sense. You look at the Micah Parsons trade, two first and a really good defensive tackle in Quinn Williams, but Micah Parsons was also like 5 years younger. So it makes sense both ways for me. It's obviously risky if you're the Ravens. This is like a we have to win or this sucks trade, but I understand the logic for it.
Um, Let me ask you a question because I will say again, I was talking about this at work, and when I was told this, I was shocked. Where are the Ravens picking in the draft this year?
This year, I would say it's like how many teams make the playoffs? Um, like 19,
Man, it's 14. It's the
14.
14th
I was gonna
overall
say
pick.
16, and I was like, that's too low. Uh,
Well, you've got the 18 is I think the last non-playoff team because you have the 7 teams in each conference,
that's
but then
right. That's right. I was
not they
thinking
weren't
12
even like,
teams.
they weren't even 18. They weren't, I believe the Lions are 17.
Yeah.
They're the 14th pick, and it's not a top 10 selection, but I feel like that's a pretty valuable pick, all things considered. You look at the Trent McDuffie trade, that was pick 29. That's not
Hmm.
necessarily the most premium first rounder. This is pick 14 plus. If you aren't back in the playoffs next year, the worst that pick's going to be is the 18th pick. And suddenly you've traded two mid first round picks for Maxx Crosby, who, yes, at his best can completely reshape your defense. But if you aren't able to complement that with winning, I don't know. I think it would put you in a pretty difficult position as a franchise. And this is a great trade, I think, for the Raiders. I think Maxx Crosby is absolutely the linchpin of a defense. But if your realistic timeline is 2 years from now, Maxx Crosby's 31 years old and potentially on the downturn physically, he's not going to be necessarily contributing to your winning regularly. So this gives you a couple more bites at the apple. Helps you support Mendoza in the short term. Maybe they trade down from 14 and pick up more mid round picks to just flood in new talent that fits Kubiak's vision and his new staff. I think the Raiders got good value. And I don't think the
Hmm.
Ravens brutally overpaid, but they gave away the kind of capital that I think has to be backed up by winning. So,
It's worth noting that the Cowboys tried to trade a first and second, so they had to outbid them with the double first there,
yeah.
which is just
If
funny of the Cowboys tried to trade for an edge rusher.
after the whole Micah thing is pretty wild. And I like the thought of, if it were the Eagles and the Cowboys did that, it'd be like, wow, that was actually kind of genius. They forced the Eagles to pay two firsts. But it's like, no, it's the AFC. The Cowboys are just kind of doing their thing.
Yeah.
Well, I have more to say about the Cowboys coming down the pike, but
All right.
let's hit some sad news for us Lions fans
Uh,
out
the
here.
most important trade that happened.
Most important trade that happened to my heart here and yours. The Lions traded running back David Montgomery to the Texans, receiving offensive lineman Juice Scruggs and a fourth round and seventh round pick in this year's draft. Um, I have a David Montgomery shirt. I have a David Montgomery poster from when I went to the game this year. I have Sonic and Knuckles merchandise all through my home that is geared both at my love of Sonic as a franchise, but also the Sonic and Knuckles tandem. It's a bummer, man. I hate to see him go. A lot of rumors about this. Definitely a lot bubbling up during and after the season that Montgomery was unhappy with his usage. I think the Texans are a great landing spot for him to be a featured back, although I speculate the Texans may add someone else alongside him to sort of do another Sonic and Knuckles, um, you know, thin replication. Not, I mean, the Knuckles will be authentic, but the Sonic maybe not. Um, but I will say, I think this is a massive haul for a running back like David Montgomery, who is very, very good, but doesn't necessarily profile as one of those top five guys in the league who normally, obviously you're not going to get like a first rounder Christian McCaffrey type situation very often, but to get a fourth and more for running back after some of the deals we've seen at the position recently feels like a pretty nice get for Detroit.
Yeah, essentially, like I know the Lions don't operate this way, but he was the backup running back. Like he was obviously not the guy. He's not Gibbs getting most of the work. So, two draft picks and an offensive lineman, which is probably arguably our biggest position of need. I don't know anything about Juice Scruggs, but if he can block people, great. Um, so yeah, I think it's good value. It sucks to see him go. I think hopefully this will allow us to open our playbook a little more. I feel like we did do a lot of like, okay, we're gonna do this with Gibbs, and when we get close to the goal, we're gonna do this with Montgomery. Maybe this kind of adds a different. Now we can kind of really focus on Gibbs, or really kind of open up our goal line passing opportunities, perhaps to tight ends or something like that. We'll see. Gives us some new perspective to think about, or maybe we'll just get another, power back for the goal line on the cheap.
Yeah, I think that our offense often worked at its best when Montgomery was able to just own the clock. But I think you're right. I think it was somewhat constraining near the goal line, and getting a younger guy to pair with Gibbs, probably I would say I would probably rather look at the free agent market just because the Lions, as we're going to cover in a moment, are a team with a lot of needs along the O line, and I'd maybe rather I suspect the Lions are probably picking up picks like this to use them to move up a few selections, as they are wont to do. I was reviewing their last draft the other day, and it was a lot of trade up for this player, trade up for this player. And in an O line class that I think a lot of teams are going to be angling for, having a few extra sweeteners that you can use to maybe move up two spots and get your preferred guy in the first or the second, I think is good business right now. And Juice Scruggs started a number of games for the Texans over the course of his young career. I believe he was a 2023 second round pick. Um, from Reddit, it sounds like Texans fans don't think he's very good, but starting experience backup on a super cheap contract for another year, and then you can either re-sign him or let him go. Um, I think the right kind of player to add. But let's quickly move through the Lions homerism as we shift into the free agency news here. The
Lots of
Lions,
news.
yes, lots of news and some Lions news. Lions cut guard Graham Glasgow, saving them 5.5 million. He was their center last year, but has sort of shifted between the interior positions throughout his career, including during his first stint with Detroit, who drafted him in the third round. And offensive tackle Taylor Decker has requested a release, which the Lions have granted. The longest tenured Detroit Lion, Taylor Decker, held down the left side of the line for a decade. Very good player for us for much of his career. We asked him to take a pay cut, and he said no, uncertain whether he was even going to return this year. Now it looks like not only will he not retire, but he will end up on another team, leaving the Lions with three holes on the offensive line, maybe two, depending on how you feel on Christian Mahogany. But I don't think there are many Lions fans who would be upset if we brought in three starting caliber offensive linemen over the course of this offseason.
Yeah, for sure. The Chargers cut guard Mekhi Becton, who I believe they just signed last free agency period, which is going to save them about $9.7 million.
Uh, keep going as I scroll down because I might have called my shot in one of our first shows last year about Mekhi Becton. Go ahead.
All right. Vikings center Ryan Kelly announced his retirement to keep with the offensive line theme. And we already mentioned the Bears guard Drew Dalman retired as well. Bears cut linebacker Tremaine Edmonds, who just made a Pro Bowl pretty recently, which is going to save them about 15 million. They have a lot of needs elsewhere they want to address. The Commanders cut corner Marshawn Lattimore, saved them 18.5 million, so pretty expensive corner there. I guess they thought they didn't need him. Sticking in the NFC East, the Giants cut a linebacker Bobby Okereke, which is going to save them about 9 million. Um, did you find your take?
I did. I in episode 3 we did a review of all 32 teams, and my question for the Chargers was, is Mekhi Becton the answer at guard? Um, he was not.
No, no
He
is
was
the
not.
answer.
Uh, yeah.
So I started blazing through those players. Was there any that you wanted to touch on?
Uh, uh, no, not really. The Marshawn Lattimore trade did not pan. Tremaine Edmonds, I think, is a pretty solid player. Suddenly hitting the free agent market, it could be a nice add for a team. Probably won't see the same level of money that he got from the Bears a number of years ago. But
Yeah.
yes, that is. I don't have much Bobby Okereke analysis, so
Yes, sir.
I'll pick up a few now here.
Sure.
Steelers cut tight end
Nope.
John. What?
You skipped the Texans. I didn't get the Texans.
Um, You're
right
right.
above
That's
that.
Texans erasure. I'm really sorry. Uh, the Texans cut safety. That sounded way too sincere. The Texans cut safety Jimmy Ward, saving them 750K, and running back Joe Mixon, which will save them 8 million. Obviously, adding David Montgomery, they now kind of have that power plus back, and Joe Mixon looking redundant on that roster there. I think he may be on the tail end of his career. He strikes me as the kind of player who may sign on the practice squad of a contender and be elevated for a few games if needed.
Mm.
Um, the Steelers, in cutting people with the last name Smith news, the Steelers cut tight end Jonnu Smith, saving them 7 million, and the Raiders will cut QB Geno Smith, barring a trade, and will get out of 8 million in cap, still owing him almost 19. I believe you did call that as a mistaken move for the
Oh,
Raiders
I
last
I sure did. It was my worst move of last offseason was the Geno Smith signing, I think it was. No, my worst move was definitely the Minka thing. The Minka trade for Jalen Ramsey was my worst move, but Geno was on there.
Yeah, I thought you liked that. I thought you thought that was a good move, the
Oh
Minka.
yeah, maybe I had it as I liked it for the Dolphins. I was thinking in my head disliking it for the Steelers.
Okay, yes.
I don't remember which one I had it down on.
Either way,
I think
probably
you're
not.
right. I think I had it as a like for the Dolphins.
Yeah, I listen, go back and listen, comment, subscribe as well. Let us know.
For
The
sure.
Raiders, I already mentioned cutting Geno Smith, but the Cardinals cutting a player with maybe a little more upside. Kyler Murray expected to be cut barring a trade. I don't see that happening. 37 million will still be on their books, but they'll save 20 million against the cap by letting Kyler Murray go. I would say probably the most proven of the free agent quarterbacks that are coming out, even if you count Tua Tagovailoa. But
Oh, I had Geno as number four. My number four least favorite move. I did mention I didn't have this in the notes. The Patriots signing Stephon Diggs, 3 years, 69 million. That was my number two. He got cut, so I'm cooking.
yeah, now I got to go find mine. So you continue. I'm
I
looking for
also
my
I,
top five.
I also have Jackson Dart draft, so that one doesn't look so good. That one doesn't look that looks like a good move.
It
Uh,
has looked pretty nice for them. That's true.
Man, I have some bad takes here. Um, anyways, I will. Yeah, Kyler Murray, I think is I don't know where he's going to end up, but I don't imagine he'll be traded. Um, the Vikings are going to be cutting running back Aaron Jones and D tackle Javon Hargrave unless they get traded, which free agency starts tomorrow, so probably not. It's going to save them about $18 million. They're also going to cut defensive tackle Jonathan Allen. So we mentioned Jonathan Grenard earlier, and here's all these other guys that they are cutting and trying to make room for something. I don't know what, but they're trying to save a lot of cap space, cutting a lot of big names here for that roster.
Um, yeah, the Vikings seem to push all in on one shape of their team, and after obviously JJ McCarthy disappointed in his sophomore season, it seems like they went all in. Now they have to tear it down to kind of do a on the fly retool to try to make themselves kind of a more lean team. And I think they tried to not to steal Golden State Warriors discourse, but they tried the two timelines thing. I don't
Nice.
think it's quite worked for their team, and they still have a big hole at corner. Unfortunately, none of my predictions really look apt for our conversation right now. I will say saying Seattle signing Cooper Kupp is a bottom five move, looking bad for me, though praising the Vrabel hire looking hot. Um,
I have the Dolphins acquiring Minka for Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu, which Jonnu did get cut.
yeah,
And then and my least favorite, my number one is whatever the Steelers are doing. And I
yeah,
mentioned Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, trading George Pickens, which looks like a good take.
yep,
And also the Minka trade. So a lot I had wrong with their offseason.
yeah. I had Max Crosby re-signing as a top move, which I
Oh,
guess, but they got him on a 3-year, $106 million contract. So I think I was praising the value of the deal
mm.
relative to some others. Anyway, now that we've sufficiently entertained each other with news of things that people listening likely don't remember,
Back to
um,
cut.
back to cuts. Did you talk
Chiefs.
about the Chiefs? Here we go. Offensive tackle Juwan Taylor being cut will save them 20 million. I am not a fan of his game, frequently called for penalties. Chiefs restructuring Patrick Mahomes' contract, lowering his salary from 78.2 million against the cap to 34, creating 43 million in space, which is a massive opening of the window for the Chiefs to make some moves.
Yeah, there's some clear areas of need on their roster. I think they're going to gear up and come back next season strong, much to our chagrin.
Yes, I I am disappointed that they will continue to make moves that will make a splash. And as we get to our segment coming up, which is our free agency predictions, I sadly did predict a splash from them.
Mm,
Um, the Dolphins cleaned up shop, cut Tyreek Hill, Bradley Chubb, the linebacker they traded quite a lot for from
yeah,
Denver and others to clear over 56 million in cap space. Also letting go Jason Sanders, their longtime kicker. This was a team that desperately needed to make moves to get cap compliant, kind of similar to the Vikings. And we're seeing the fruits of that as they shift their focus towards being a younger team.
yeah. I'm interested to see what this team's going to look like next season. But I'm happy that they're moving into a different direction. Let's talk about the Cowboys. The restructuring contracts of Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and guard Tyler Smith to create 66 million in cap space. They're apparently working on doing the same for Kenny Clark, Quinnen Williams, and Osa Odigizua. Oh, I think I slammed that name. Um, I don't know if those have been done, but at the time I wrote this, they weren't done. So they cleared up a lot of room for themselves.
Yeah, Jerry Jones talked about, I think it was last week, how he plans on being willing to spend this offseason, and it seems like they're really lining up for that. They should have also restructured a minor players contract, so they could have had 6, 7 million. That would have really helped with the aggregating of articles about those restructures. Unfortunately, missing out on some SEO
Mm.
with that, but they've already started. I'm so sorry, everybody. They've already started making use of that opened cap. They've signed running back Javonte Williams to a 3-year contract, 16 million guaranteed. Decent money for a running back, not a backbreaker. They've also put a second round, $5.7 million tender on Brandon Aubrey. So a team can offer a competing deal that the Cowboys can match, and if they don't match, they receive a second round pick. For a kicker, it's pretty unlikely. I don't know. Maybe the Los Angeles Rams just go crazy and say, special teams is the last piece and offer him a ton of money, but I don't see that coming. They also franchise tagged wide receiver George Pickens, who was one of the better acquisitions last offseason of any team.
Yeah, so they're working on getting big deals done for I think both of those players, but until then they'll have the franchise tag. Um, Other players with the franchise tag, Falcons franchise tag, tight end Kyle Pitts. His last season was very interesting in a couple of games where he exploded, and then a couple of games where he was barely used. The Jets franchise tagged running back Brees Hall until they can agree on a long-term deal. We'll see. I believe that one is what is it called, like non-guaranteed franchise tag or whatever. Um, non something, non
For
exempt.
for Brees
I
Hall,
don't know. Yeah,
I'll look it up.
yeah. And then the Colts are transition tagging quarterback Daniel Jones until they can agree on a long-term deal. So I think they want Daniel Jones to be their long-term quarterback, as probably also shown by letting Anthony Richardson seek a trade. And they're just putting a tag on him so they can have more time to work out a new contract, and so he doesn't leave in free agency.
Non-exclusive tag.
Non-exclusive. That's what it was. Non-exclusive. I couldn't think of the word.
Yes. Um, this is a pretty rare tool, I would say, on average, but this gives the Jets the rights to match any offers he may negotiate with other teams. And if he leaves, he'll get they'll get two firsts back, which
That would be
I don't
crazy.
know what team thinks they're one brief haul away right now.
Yeah,
Quite the maneuver. Um, yeah, I think the plan for I'm sure a few of these players is to lock them down. I was reading today; it looks like they may want Kyle Pitts to play on the tag, but um, there have also been a couple other extensions and signings with existing teams here. The Ravens and QB Tyler Huntley agreed to a 2-year, $11 million contract. I think he had a brief stint in Cleveland, but returned to be the backup to Lamar. And then the 49ers signed kicker Eddie Pinheiro to a 4-year, $17 million extension, which is big for them. They've had a lot of kicker questions.
Hmm. Seems to be their guy going forward. A couple other big deals that have occurred prior to free agency really getting underway. The Bills and center Connor McGovern, 4-year, $52 million extension, 32 million of that is guaranteed. The Chargers and edge Khalil Mack, a 1-year, fully guaranteed $18 million deal. And then the last big deal that was made
Wait,
prior.
wait.
I'm
There's
waiting.
another
I'm waiting.
Chargers move I want to mention.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry, we treasure our ability to transition seamlessly between teams so much that I was willing to completely shatter our momentum to wedge in the fact that the Chargers also signed center Tyler Biadasz, formerly of the Commanders, to a 3-year, $30 million deal.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Let me change one of my free agency things real quick.
Was Tyler Biadasz one of your, or was it you had a guy going to the Chargers?
I had a different guy going to the Chargers. Yeah.
Here, I'll take the Eagles while you make that adjustment.
Okay.
The Eagles and defensive tackle Jordan Davis agreed to a 3-year, $78 million extension with 65 million guaranteed, making him the highest paid D tackle in the history of the league. 1 year after Milton Williams reset the market, Jordan Davis comes back around and breaks the bank at the nose tackle spot. Um, Trying to do some rapid math, that's 26 million a year. Um, Really huge contract, but someone who can swing games. I think we famously saw that in the matchup with Los Angeles, blocking extra points and field goals, and just generally being an incredibly disruptive player
Mhm.
up the middle. I certainly think he has talent worthy of resetting the market, and he's a linchpin of their team identity. So nice contract for the Eagles and Jordan Davis.
Big deal. Big deal. All right. Whew. That's not everything, but most things that have happened up until this point. So Jared and I have each picked 10 players to go to 10 teams. I didn't do any re-signings because that just seems boring. I don't know if Jared applied the
I
same
did not
logic.
do any re-signings either.
Yeah,
That's
that'd be
the
like
one or
Mike
two
Evans
maybe.
going to the Bucks. Okay, all right,
Yeah.
awesome. So yeah, none of that. 10 players going to 10 new teams, and yeah, we're gonna have fun with this. I'm confident in like 5 or 6 of these, and then the last couple, I'm just like, oh, I'm just throwing stuff at the wall. I have no idea. But I'm interested to see what we're gonna do here. I think one of us should start first, and then maybe we should snake um, the next person. Does the next two, whatever.
Hang on, I may have ended up with 11 by mistake.
So sad. Can't believe
That's
you did
fine.
that.
I can actually lump two of these together. I'll start. I don't want to talk too much about the Lions, but I want to talk about a departing Lion.
Hmm.
And that is linebacker Alex Anzalone.
No, not Alex.
Um, Up there in age, but still pretty talented, pretty capable in pass pro, kind of playing that more coverage linebacker role. A lot connecting him to the Jets, sort of a tone setter for Aaron Glenn's defense. But I was actually just reading today, as I had already kind of formulated this thought. He's been linked to Chicago, which makes a ton of sense. Defensive coordinator Dennis Allen, obviously having ties to Anzalone, who began his career in New Orleans before moving over to Detroit with Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell. I think the Bears are a bit more. Almost said I think the Bears are a bit more competitive than the Jets. The Bears are competitive. The Jets are in the core of a massive rebuild. I
Yeah.
think Anzalone still has a few years of nice production, and coverage linebacker is not an easy position to play. So
Hmm.
I have a hunch that Chicago might circle him as a lower cost replacement for Tremaine Edmonds, who they released as we mentioned earlier. Um, Maybe give him more of a short term deal. I feel like, he did a great job growing with the Lions defense as a young leader. I wonder if he doesn't quite fit the Jets timeline as a leader, and you'd maybe rather target somebody who's a little um, either younger and has higher long term upside for the Jets, or just opt to fill that position through the draft and let another veteran on your defense take that leadership role.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that. Following Aaron Glenn to the Jets, that would be kind of fun too.
Mhm. That's the
Um,
other team he's been linked to. So it looks like, there's a good chance he ends up with someone he's familiar with.
Yeah. I don't mind that one bit, Jared. I don't. I like it.
Sweet.
Anzalone, I hope he stays a Lion, but he's Unk.
He's
So
Unk. He's been fighting with our social media team once or twice. We already had to
that's normal.
restructure to make him happy, so it's gonna be tough.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. Um, I'm gonna start with a weird player and a weird team. Well, maybe it's not a weird player, but it's a weird player for this segment. Tight end David Njoku, who didn't
Ah,
want to be on the Browns anymore. They seem to be content with Harold Fannin as their premier tight end going forward. So he requested his release. And I was looking through the league and I was looking through who needs tight end help. Where would a player like Njoku want to go after being on the Browns? And I was like, well, he probably wants to go to a good team. Because, he's played on the Browns forever. He probably wants to experience something else. And I looked at teams' tight end rooms, and there is a team that sneakily tight end room is like empty coming into the season because I think there's a good chance their tight end leaves. And that team is the Eagles because Dallas
mm.
Goedert is a free agent. And I think at this point in their respective careers, I would not be surprised if Goddard is too expensive for the Eagles to pay him, whereas Njoku might be okay with a minor deal to get a chance to play on a team that actually wins football games. So that is that is my first free agency pick.
Yeah, that's a nice one. I was thinking about finding a landing spot for Njoku, and I have a few tight ends, one of whom I am going to decide what team he'll end up on in real time, pretty much. But I think that the Eagles do have a huge void there. That's a nice call, um, and seem like a great candidate to sign Njoku for maybe a 2 year between 9 and $15 million deal, or 2 year, sorry, 18 and $25 million deal, something to that effect. Get him around 10
Hmm.
million a year, and then maybe draft someone a little high to develop behind Njoku as sort of the number two. I think it's a great pick. My next one is two players, and
Okay.
if I were on Kalshi, right, and I could make like a parlay. I don't know how these things work. I would pair these two players together because I feel really confident that one or both of these moves will happen. Okay.
Okay.
I have both of these players going to the same team. I'm going to tell you the players. I want you to guess the team. I think you're going to get it.
Okay.
Defensive end Trey Hendrickson and linebacker Quincy Williams.
Cowboys.
Cowboys, you bet. In the deal
Yep.
for yeah, for sure. In the deal for Quinnen Williams, mid-season last year, there was talk that they were also trying to bring Quincy along in that deal that fell through. Quincy
Mhm.
had immediately got benched afterwards, basically. Seems like his days with the Jets are numbered, even though in the articles I was reading today, he said, "Oh, I want to be a Jet for life, whatever." I expect he'll leave. Would be shocked if he, didn't naturally gravitate toward playing with his brother. The Cowboys had interest. Granted, they've changed defensive coordinators, but I would be surprised to see them not value a player who was an All Pro in 2023. And despite what the Jets have said, didn't have a massive drop off last year. And then the Maxx Crosby trade attempt shows that the Cowboys are in the veteran pass rushing market. I think Trey Hendrickson represents the top end of that market, the most proven production, but a little bit older. And they seem comfortable going with older and a little more proven in that Maxx Crosby bucket. I could absolutely see them rolling out the red carpet for Trey Hendrickson and completing that defensive transformation that started with shipping out Micah Parsons. Then you add Quinnen Williams. With Quincy as nice insurance for DeMarvion Overshone, and Hendrickson being a solid surrogate for what you were getting from Micah Parsons.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a good pick. I was close to making a similar Trey Hendrickson pick. I didn't have Quincy on my list of 10, but I do think that he belongs with his brother, wherever they choose to, yeah. I had Trey Hendrickson. He is on my list. I had him. I was between the Cowboys and this team, and ultimately I went with this team because the vibe just made sense to me, which the vibe makes sense to the Cowboys too. I had him going to the Bucks, who desperately
Um,
need some edge rushing as well. And I don't know. He's like some part of my mind just tells me he's defensive Baker Mayfield, um, which doesn't make any sense really, but it just the vibes make sense in my brain. So that's what I wrote down here on my Google Doc.
I he does seem like the kind of guy who's gonna hate the Bengals for the rest of his life. In the same way that Baker hates his former team. They can bond over their mutual distaste for AFC North teams.
Right, right.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's a. I really didn't have the Bucks at front of mind in this exercise just because I struggle to get a read for the kind of players that they would want, kind of moves they want to make. But certainly a good landing spot for Trey Hendrickson. And just real quick, I want to throw something in there for the two-man game listeners. Quincy Williams is like a much more talented Thanasis Antetokounmpo.
Mm,
If
there you
that's a
go.
good analogy there with Giannis. No, great pick for Trey. Certainly the Bucks are I think a few pieces away from really reestablishing themselves at the top of the NFC South.
Hmm.
Um, Flipping over to the AFC South, I want to mention Chig Okonkwo, Tennessee Titans tight end,
Mm.
who has actually been more productive than I really expected over the course of his young career. I think in part because it's such a bare cupboard in Tennessee, but he's a little younger. And, I could see him going to a team like, all right, I'm going to pick where he's going now. I don't want him to go here, but it just feels like, maybe he goes to Denver, right? Maybe he sort of supplants or plays alongside of an Ingram, their team that has a hole at the tight end position. I would say Ingram is solid, but not particularly elite. Um, and I'd imagine in a Bo Nix offense, you want some kind of solid check down reads that he can make, and Okonkwo might be that guy. But certainly seems like if the right team kind of unlocks him and unleashes him, he could be really productive. And I don't think that's going to be Tennessee. And to be fair, Okonkwo feels like a bit of a luxury at the tight end position, not quite being in that Brock Bowers, Trey McBride tier where no matter how bad your team is, they're still going to be at the center of things. He's sort of in that very good category, and so I think could be a nice compliment or maybe vie to be tight end one somewhere that there's a hole at the tight end position.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. And also, Sean Payton loves just getting tight ends and doing whatever with them. And he does seem to be that kind of athletic, versatile player that can maybe do a little more than your standard tight end as well. You run him like at the goal line as a fullback, and it's like, okay, that kind of guy. I could see that.
Although Taysom Hill is a free agent, so maybe that's the only person that's really going to
Taysom
get
Hill's like
signed. But
35. He's so old.
he's ancient. What an interesting player. Super unique guy. Anyway, that's
Um,
my Chigo Conquo take, so I'll pass it on to you.
Yeah, I had an order that I was going to go, and it was immediately ruined when you said Trey Hendrickson because I just jumped to my Trey Hendrickson one. So now I'm just going to go off of you, I think. I had a player land with the Titans as well, so I'm going to jump to that.
Sure.
I was looking at their team, and they just have one good cornerback on their whole roster, and it's L'Jarius Sneed, and he wasn't even that good last year. But their secondary, aside from that, is pretty bad. So I was thinking, this is a team with some cap space that can spend. They can probably spend on relatively big name player. And this player maybe cares more about that than winning. I don't know if that's true or not. Um, but I ultimately wrote Marshawn Lattimore into the Titans secondary
Mm.
to work opposite L'Jarius Sneed so that they have two corners that are able to correctly play football some of the time. I think that would help some of their defensive woes. And I know that, it's hard to pick with the Titans because they looked so bad last year. There's so many areas of need, but corner seems to be one of them. And I just kind of picked a corner that I know and put him there.
Yeah, I do think Lattimore has fallen off,
Yeah.
and I wonder if he's ultimately a progress stopper. But um, that makes me skeptical that it would be a wise move for the Titans to get that player in particular, which means it's pretty likely the Titans will get that player.
Right, right. Yeah, some of these
Um,
I'm not like this is the greatest move, but it's like this seems like something that would occur.
yeah, I have one spite pairing that we'll get to later, but sticking in the AFC, I did a lot in the AFC South. I actually have a couple Jaguars on the move.
Mm,
One of them's Travis Etienne,
yeah.
and I think he's really talented and really productive. I do just wonder whether the Jaguars regime wants to bring in their own guy. Will probably be a little bit expensive, and a team that maybe doesn't have a ton of room. I haven't taken a super close look at their cap sheet by any means, in the sense that I haven't taken a look at their cap sheet at all. Uh, is Houston. But if you want to recreate a dynamic backfield with sort of a lightning and thunder combo, I could absolutely see Houston looking at ETN as someone who would be a really nice complement to the power that you would get out of David Montgomery, someone who can maybe break a few runs loose, continue to take pressure off of CJ Stroud. I don't think Montgomery would be super happy with that, seeing as he kind of wants to go somewhere he can be the number one. But I could totally see the fit for ETN, and I would say also a decent chance he returns to Jacksonville. But that pairing just made sense in my head of like a really strong Lightning Thunder duo that they clearly prioritized based on what they were willing to trade to get Montgomery.
Sleeping on Woody Marks, man. What about Woody Marks? What is he doing? Just sitting there?
I've to be honest forgot about Woody Marks until right now, and Woody Marks was on my fantasy team, so I think that speaks to all the confidence I have. I mean, I think the thing is, if you are on a team that is so devoid of running back talent and you're still just okay,
Yeah.
maybe he has a year two, year three jump. Maybe he's figuring out pass pro, and has a role as sort of a third down pass catching back. But um, I think if Woody Marks looked truly elite, he would have kept getting snap after snap after snap, and that didn't exactly come through.
Yeah. Sorry to burst your Chico Conquo bubble, but the Broncos just signed Adam Troutman to a 3-year extension. So,
For how
um,
much?
I don't know. It didn't have any numbers on it.
Um, yeah, I
The
guess
tweet I just looked at.
Troutman is solid, but I wasn't
A
necessarily.
former Saints fan, so
Oh,
Sean
I
Payton
guess that
really,
doesn't
really,
actually.
really doesn't like his guys.
I was like Alex
Um,
Troutman. I know that name, but do I care?
Adam.
Oh, Eagles receiving calls for Jalen Carter. That's interesting. Anyway,
Mm.
uh, good to know.
Um, yeah, I had Travis Etienne as one of my Jaguars on the move, and then I realized I had two Jaguars on the move, and I didn't want that, so I erased him off my list. But I had him going to a different team, and I'll mention that later because I do have a similar type of player going to that same team. Um, so instead, I'll do the Jaguar that I still have, which is linebacker Devin Lloyd, who I think had a pretty good kind of resurgence type season this last year. His first couple of years in the league were kind of rough, but he had a pretty good year for the Jags. I feel like when I watched their games, that was a name I just kind of heard called on the broadcast several times for defensive plays being made. I know he had that really long pick six, for
Mhm.
example. Um, and I was trying to think. Again, this was a vibe one. I was just going off pure vibes for this guy I don't really know that well. But I was thinking of a team that needs linebacker help that is also pretty young because Devin Lloyd is not that old yet. Um, that the vibe made sense to me. So from one cat to the other, I had the AFC South to the NFC South. The Devin Lloyd ends up a Panther.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I have a Panthers conversation to be had later, but I think that's a nice pull. I think the Panthers are really under the radar right now because they don't necessarily have questions at a lot of the positions, like offensive line is okay. And obviously their quarterback room isn't causing much conversation, but this is a playoff team. Um, right on the fringes of being a winning team for the year, and picking up a defensive field general makes a lot of sense. So I like that pairing. Let's do one more Jaguar for some reason. I don't know why. I think this player just interested me because of the trade circumstance. I'll be honest, I looked up landing spots for this player and got actually a pretty convincing answer. There was a trade that happened in the middle of the season that sort of went under the radar, ish. This trade was a corner for corner swap between the Browns and the Jaguars. Browns receiving Tyson Campbell,
Hmm.
and the Jags receiving Greg Newsome, who was the number two to Denzel Ward for a number of years with Cleveland. And he's a guy that intrigues me. I I was looking at his stats. He had a really strong start, fell off a little bit in Cleveland, but when I was looking up Greg Newsome, I saw an article um, potentially connecting him. This is via Sports Illustrated, Randy Gursey's article. Apparently, he's been linked to Seattle, and with the turnover they have, especially on the back end of their defense, and I think some of the credibility issues Reek Woolen had from time to time, I wonder if they're looking to potentially add a corner and maybe they can save a little bit by getting a guy who's maybe a bit of a depressed asset in Greg Newsome. Um, and someone who I imagine if he is next to like a true number one, will serve really well in that number two role, having some experience doing it against Denzel Ward.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Lots of teams I think have some secondary slash corner issues, and I feel like my corner knowledge is just not there. Like there were so many guys I
Yep.
was reading a list of names, and I was like, is this a good player? I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, which is why ultimately I said Marshawn Lattimore of the Titans because I was like, that's a guy I know at least.
Yeah.
But you know, so if they get some corner, basically is the idea. That's the idea of these destinations, right? They're getting somebody at that position,
Yep.
most likely. Yeah. Um, I already forgot what you said. Oh, Jaguars to where? Where did you have them landing?
Seattle. Seattle.
Seattle. So I'll go to Seattle here. Seattle has a handful of guys that are kind of on the way out. I think a lot of which will demand money. I feel like Reek Woolen has no shot of sticking around,
Yep.
which is why your landing spot makes sense. I didn't have Reek Woolen going anywhere because I think he's also kind of overrated at this point. But I had this premier position that I think a lot of teams will be looking for to pay. Where he talked about one in Trey Hendrickson, another edge rusher here, Boye Mafe.
Mm.
Um, I just feel like when it comes down to it, they're just not going to be able to pay everybody. So this is who I kind of had as their odd man out. And I was looking around at teams that need edge help, that need defensive help, teams that, you know, a guy like Boye Mafe just won the Super Bowl, so I don't know if contending is necessarily at the top of his priority list, or if he just wants to go somewhere where he's going to make a lot of money. And that's kind of what I leaned towards, and I put him on the Commanders, who have Ancient
Mm.
Von Miller's probably out the door. Bobby Wagner's probably out the door, or also just there and Ancient, as well as some of their other edge rushers. I was reading about their edge rushing room. They had three guys last year that all underwent some sort of injury, only one of whom had like 5+ sacks before getting injured. So it's a pretty thin room. And I think they could use kind of a leader on the defensive line because their defense needs help in a lot of ways. And I think edge rushing is kind of the premium right now on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think that's a nice call, and I think that they've also turned over D coordinators, so they probably need some an influx of talent there. Um, all right, I've got two guys that I don't necessarily have a destination for. I more just want to talk about why they're on my radar.
Okay.
And I chose them mostly for their age. I couldn't tell you much about their play. Former Chargers guard Zion Johnson, 26 years old, and Buffalo guard David Edwards at 29 years old. These are both players who are young enough to still be considered in the probably 4 to 5 year plus timeline of their team, just based on the fact that offensive linemen age pretty well in the sport. And part of the reason I bring this up is because the Packers re-signed their midseason. They promoted Sean Ryan to starting center and gave him a 3-year, $33 million deal to likely stay afloat there on the interior. And it just struck me this offseason that a lot of teams opted to move on from their slightly overpaid interior offensive linemen, right? We saw that with Mekhi Becton. I want to say there were a few others that I'm trying to put right in front of my face right now, but um, there's been a lot of, I mean, Jawan Taylor's a tackle, but same philosophy, right?
Hmm.
Teams starting to just kind of turn guys over at the center of their offensive lines, and it just kind of made me um, think about, there's been some speculation with Detroit needing offensive line that letting Taylor Decker walk is in part because it's such a promising draft. I'm just really curious to see what the market looks like on the interior offensive line. Are we still giving these, market average contracts to free agents that are similar to the Connor McGovern deal in the 18 million range? Is it in the 13 million range? Um, as we're signing these free agents because I think that'll tell us a lot about how teams view the interior offensive line in the draft and also whether there's been a shift in philosophy at the interior. And I think it's also worth mentioning that there are a few high profile teams. Houston is one, Detroit is another. Cleveland is having to turn over their entire offensive line this one off season that are sort of in the spotlight for O line need, but there are a lot of mediocre to bad teams that could probably use guard help as well. And so I think we're going to see those players go to a lot of different teams and just curious to see how the market reacts to a lot of different squads cutting bait with guards and centers that didn't quite work out in the middle of their defense offense. Excuse me.
Yeah, there are a lot of teams that need a lot of offensive help. Wouldn't be surprised if one or both of those guys you just said end up on the Browns, who basically need an entire new offensive line.
Yeah,
Um, so, yeah, there's going to be a lot of movement up front, I think, this offseason. And I feel like we're at a point even where there's just not enough offensive linemen. Like, we're going to start the year, and there's going to be some teams that are really stringing together some questionable front five, and it's going to be ugly.
yeah. And I wonder if that's going to drive up prices too. So anyway, I don't
Hmm.
really have a destination for them. More just kind of a philosophical thought about
Yeah.
players of their ilk. There's some older guys who are probably 2 year solutions, but what about the guys who can be 4 or 5 year solutions? How are they paid? So we'll see.
And one of those guys is the only offensive lineman I have on my list, and that's Tyler Linderbaum. Probably the most premier offensive lineman in this free agency class. Linderbaum, probably leaving the Ravens ultimately. I just don't know if they're going to be able to afford the price that he's going to be asking for, especially after trading for a giant contract in Maxx Crosby. Um, so originally I had the Chargers written down, but you just broke that news about them signing a center because I was
Yeah.
thinking about how bad their offensive line looked last year. Granted, both tackles were injured in Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, but their interior offensive line, Mekhi Becton was cut, obviously, just didn't do much of anything. So I was thinking about reinforcing that for them, but if they just signed a center, this doesn't make any sense. So I had to think about the other teams. I thought about the Texans, whose offensive line looked suspect multiple times throughout the year, but I don't think they have a ton of room. A team that somehow has a ton of room because they cleared a bunch of room. Um, and I think their offensive line was questionable at times. Um, was the New England Patriots. I feel like
Oh,
a lot of the blame went to rookie Will Campbell, but I think there was just a lot wrong with their offensive line. Drake May was often scrambling in many of those playoff games, and when I look at their Super Bowl run, it feels like the weaker part of their game was their offense, and I feel like they need a better line in order for Drake May to kind of do what he needs to do in order for them to get to that next level. No, I would understand if people were thinking about skill position players. They don't have, these gangbuster guys to make big plays in the receiving room. They have Travion Henderson in the running back room, but they didn't really utilize him that way. So I would understand if people think they're going to spin big on something like that. But for me, I just think they need to really reinforce their offensive line because, I mean, really any true blue Super Bowl contender, that's something they're going to have down pat.
yeah. The podcasts I listened to mentioned how much room they have. Sneaky a lot of room. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I think there's going to be quite the market for Linderbaum. I have a spot for him as well.
Yeah.
Um, Now I probably want him to go to Detroit if I could like have my druthers, but
Yep.
um, there's been a lot of speculation around Detroit concerning Arizona's center, who holy smokes, talk about a name that I do not want to try to pronounce. I don't know if you've seen his name.
No, you said
Um,
Arizona's like current center?
yes, I want to say it's Hjalte Froholt. Um,
Oh yeah,
uh, so
Danish.
yes, but there's been talk that he might be a cut candidate or a trade candidate. We've brought over the offensive coordinator of the Cardinals, and so looking at the fact that this may end up being a really expensive center market, um, I predict that maybe Detroit makes a trade for Froholt, or maybe he's released and the Lions target him because I think the Cardinals are gonna go sign Tyler Linderbaum. You know why? Because they're the Cardinals, and Tyler Linderbaum being a Pro Bowl center who could really be a nasty tone setting, exciting offensive line player for an elite team, of course, will instead go to a team that can give him a massively overmarket contract because they just have money and they're bored. And I
Mm.
feel like the Cardinals are going to ruin the fun of having Linderbaum play for a high leverage team by rolling out the red carpet and giving him more money than he could ever want. And then he will disappear from the collective consciousness for 3 years, um, or until whenever he becomes a free agent or trade target again. And then we'll suddenly be thinking about Linderbaum. But I just have this fear he's going to vanish into dust.
That would be very Cardinals of them to do instead of addressing some of the other many positions of need on their roster.
Yeah. Or just accepting that they're not a Tyler Linderbaum away from anything.
They're
Uh,
really not. They're
they're
not.
not. But we'll see. We'll see. Just I get this dark feeling that I'm going to see that like on the NFL, timeline on Yahoo Sports or whatever, and just kind of weep to myself.
Fair. I'll go ahead and knock out, we mentioned Linderbaum, the Ravens. I'll knock out this other AFC North team I have, the Steelers, losing running back Kenneth Gainwell. That's right, I'm talking about Kenneth Gainwell. Why? Because in my mind, it makes so much sense. Originally, I thought Kenneth Walker, no. Travis Etienne, no. It would just make sense for the Chiefs to sign Kenneth Gainwell as like a backfield guy to just catch passes, little dump offs from Mahomes and turn nothing into something. Because that's what the Chiefs do. That's what they did with Jerick McKinnon a long time ago. Um, and I don't know if they're going to spend big on the other two running backs I mentioned. And this would make sense to get, kind of a budget beast here.
Yeah, ETN, I thought potentially for them, but I think you're right. I think their pact of punishment setting after having won so many times is they're only allowed to spend so much at running back. So, just really not their way to go break the bank for running back. And I'm not super familiar with Gainwell's game.
He had a great season.
I mean, maybe he's a value for them. Um, could absolutely also see them underinvesting in the position and being punished. So.
Mm.
Isve, I would like to talk about the player that I know everyone is curious about their destination.
Oh God.
It's a guy who's been at the front of mind. You're thinking, oh, he must be talking about Jake Tonges. No, no, no. I'm not sarcastically leading up to Jake Tonges. Damon, what wide receiver signed a 1 year, $10 million contract with the Rams last offseason?
1 year, $10 million with the Rams. The Rams.
It was not a
Rams.
free agent deal. It was an extension technically.
The
I think he
Rams.
tested the market. Yeah.
Was it Jordan Whittington? Was it Tutu Atwell?
It
Was
was
it?
Tutu Atwell, baby. Let's talk about Tutu
All
Atwell. All right.
right.
Here's the
Didn't realize
thing.
he was a free agent.
Yeah, well, probably didn't realize he was in the league, right? Why am I
Oh,
talking about the Rams' third to fourth wide receiver?
uh,
I have been thinking a lot about 13 personnel because when the Lions hired their offensive coordinator, they talked about how he had kind of pioneered it. Sean McVay took over the league with it last offseason. And the tight end position has just become more popular with the emergence of Trey McBride's, Brock Bowers. You brought up Colston Loveland. There's also Tyler Warren.
mhm.
Travis Kelsey's been in the spot. So tight end has really become a really high focal point position. And so my question, and I actually did some digging on Tutu Atwell, who was inactive for their game against the Bears, and apparently a big part of why he kind of became inactive and totally fell off last year was because of the shift to 13 personnel. Sean McVay was talking about our offense evolved. We didn't have the role for him that we thought we did as we moved to the three tight end sets and those kinds of things. And so I'm wondering, is this the offseason where we see a Tutu Atwell style contract for a second or third tight end who is not a national name? And do teams start to have to outbid each other in the way that they were giving bigger contracts than we expected to wide receiver 2-3 types to tight end
Mhm.
2-3s? As the league might start to look at what the Rams are doing and maybe try to emulate 13 personnel. And so this was really my way of asking kind of an open-ended question of, will the jaw-dropping really that much money contract go to a guy like Jake Tonges? I don't think it will be him, but um, is Chiga Conquo making 12 million instead of 8 million a year? Are other backups doing that kind of thing? Um, as far as where I think these guys will go, Cincinnati needs wide receivers, and Zach Robinson's from the Rams coaching tree, so maybe they'll take a flyer on 2-2 as their wide receiver three. And Jake Tonjes to Green Bay because I Googled Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, and LaFleur is from that coaching tree. And so maybe they give him like, you know, 2 years, 9 million. Um, After they've already had to move on from Josiah DeGuara, and have struggled to fill in at tight end behind their sort of top guy. Um, Chicago with Mercedes Lew or sorry, it was Denver that had Mercedes Lewis, but like, there's some teams that back end of the tight end roster is a little bare, and then there's a shift towards more tight ends. I'm just kind of curious to see how it all shakes out.
Very interesting. It was like a player, but it was also a philosophical question that just occurred.
Yeah.
Um,
I want you to find another NFL podcast this week talking about Tutu Atwell landing spots. All right.
True.
Say what you will about our product, but we offer things you won't find anywhere else.
That's you're not wrong. At some point in your rant, you mentioned the Bears, so I'll say a Bears player now. Um, I this was my 10th spot. I really rotated between a lot of guys here. Eventually, I landed on linebacker Tremaine Edmonds because I think
Huh?
that he's going to want to go somewhere that wants to pay him. And you know who loves paying guys and who cleared up a lot of cap space? The Cowboys.
Uh,
You know whose defense is horrible? The Cowboys. So this is a player that I think, Jerry Jones to me does seem like the owner to really read the resume and be like, this guy made the Pro Bowl. This is a good player right here. Let's sign that guy, and give him maybe more money than he's actually supposed to get elsewhere. So this is, I had a lot of names for this position. At once it was Trey Hendrickson. I think I flaunted with the idea of Bobby Okereke going to a division rival just to spite the Giants for releasing him. Um, but they need a lot on defense, so it really doesn't even matter what position you kind of pencil in here.
yeah, I think that's a nice call too. I could totally see Jerry looking at his previous contract and misinterpreting that as, wow, he's a, $18 million a year player. That makes him a good player. I could totally see him coming to that conclusion. Yeah, it's a nice pull. My last spot here goes to one of
This is
three
your
players.
last one? Oh yeah, you did two at once. I still have two more.
I have two more. Which two did I do at once? Oh, I
The
can throw
two
another one out there.
the
I
two
thought I miscounted.
Cowboys that were going to the two Trey Hendrickson and somebody else. I went to the Cowboys.
All
I had
right,
two of them.
I'll throw this out super quick because I think it's right, even though I don't like this player and don't want to give him any airtime. So I'm just gonna say my pick and then I'll immediately pass the baton. Um, but first, I do get to ask you this question, which I was hoping to ask you. What are the four teams that Devontae Adams has played for in his career?
The Green Bay Packers, the Raiders, the Rams. Um, you said four. There's a four. There's
Yeah.
a fourth team.
Yep.
Um, am I just blanking completely, or is this like super unknown?
Let me make sure that I'm remembering correctly that he even played for this team, which is crazy because it's the team after the Rams and before
He's on the Rams right now.
or no, sorry, after the Raiders before the Rams. Sorry.
Oh, the Jets. He was on the Jets.
He was on the
Yeah, yeah,
Jets. Doesn't that just feel like a fever dream? I don't know.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
I think that the Rams love finding older, talented guys on the tail end of their career, handing them a nice 1 year contract. They did it with OBJ. They've done it now with Devontae Adams. Stephon Diggs, 1 year, $18 million to the Rams.
Sure.
Um, just feels like something that might happen. I don't like Stephon Diggs very much as a guy. So
Yep.
I don't need to talk about him any further. It just he feels like it's his turn to go do the Rams thing.
No, I could see that for sure. Um, I don't like the Eagles very much as a team, so let's talk about them losing safety Reed Blankenship to the Bengals because they need a safety really badly. And I was between him and Kyle Duggar, and I went with Reed Blankenship. So,
Cincinnati fans are going to be drooling over their offseason additions of Reed Blankenship and Tutu Atwell. Uh, it's it's like the they do the posts where it shows the roster of like this offense is crazy, and it's just like everything is the same except two twos at the bottom, and then like did their defense level up, and they just had Reed Blankenship. Anyway, um, here's my last pick, and it's three guys. I think one of them is going to end up with this team. I think Wan'Dale Robinson, Rashid Shaheed, or Jawan Jennings will be
Hmm.
a Carolina Panther in 2026.
A new slot
Um,
guy.
yeah, sneaky, not very good at drafting wide receivers team. They burned out with Xavier Legette. They had to move on from Jonathan Mingo a number of years ago. Um,
Mingo.
yeah, I will give credit to Tet McMillan, of course, was a nice pick, and he's looked like a number one.
Jalen
Um,
Coker.
Jalen Coker's looked good too, and I factored that in here absolutely, which is why I think Wandale or Rashid might be more realistic, especially because Jawan Jennings is another, you know, really big receiver in the way that Tet is 6'5", he's 6'3". They actually weigh the exact same, so um, I feel like that would maybe be a bit redundant on their team. But I think this is a team that probably is closer than they thought they were, and that feels like if they add a guy like a Wandale or a Rashid Shaheed, they suddenly feel pretty good about Trent McMillan, one of these three guys, Jalen Coker in there as well. Anything you might get out of Leggett, maybe you draft a guy in a middle to late round to pick up some slot. Um, but I think they need another pass catcher to diversify their offense a little bit, and I expect them to go bigger than maybe some folks expect, as they've kind of been lurking in the shadows in the public consciousness recently.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a nice like established slot receiver could be pretty nice for their offensive attack. I like that take from you. Um, my last player, my third edge rusher. Gonna get away from these edge rushers. This one is Odafe Owe from the Chargers,
Mm.
who's really good and 27, which is like premier, prime number that teams like their guys to be. I don't think the Chargers are going to pay him. I don't know why. I just have that feeling. And I thought, man, where needs some edge help? How about a team that got rid of an edge rusher that also just got an entirely new front office and restructured a lot of people to make a lot of cap room? And they're like, maybe we actually needed that premier edge rusher that we traded away, and we should go now spend to get one. And that team is the Miami Dolphins, who
Mm.
of course traded away Jalen Phillips at the deadline to the Eagles, and now they are severely lacking edge presence alongside Chop Robinson down there. So, um, big name, big player, fits the timeline, relatively speaking. Um, New ownership, I think, could kind of look at it as we made a bad trade. And maybe it wasn't a bad trade. They had a third round pick, it was decent value, but we made a trade and got rid of this premier position. We need to make up for that now.
Yeah, I think that's a nice pick. Also think that he's probably in that closer to tier three edge rusher, than being, one of those tier one, tier two guys. So maybe, you're saving a little bit over a Trey Hendrickson. And Maxx Crosby was never an option for them, right? So, yeah, maybe able to get him a bit on the cheap because their cap is crazy. Um, I like that. And I've liked this exercise. I hope it's been clear to the listener. Our goal was not to take the 10 flashiest names, 20 total, and just spit them out. I think we picked guys we were curious about, teams with holes that intrigued us, and wanted to offer something a little bit different in the way of our free agent focus than what I've been hearing the rest of the week, which is where shall Kyler Murray go?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere he'll be 1B probably. End
Yeah.
of discussion, right? There's going to be so much to dig into in next week's episode. That'll be a
Neither of
nice
us
four
had
hours
Kenneth
of
Walker,
gold.
which is a little surprising to me.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I think Kenneth Walker strikes me as the kind of classically going to be overpaid, not because he's not good, but because he's too good for teams to see him as value, and they're gonna, like,
Hmm.
I don't know if Kenneth Walker should be getting 3 years, 45, but I think he might, from a team
Right.
that, do the Cardinals look at their offense and say, well, we don't have a quarterback. Let's start with that. It's interesting. It's going to be an interesting offseason. I tried to find value signings or guys who would be a nice fit, but we'll see.
There you have it. That's us. We did it.
Yes, thank you for joining back in with us after the hiatus. If that's why you're listening, otherwise, welcome. Like, subscribe, engage, tell friends, tell family, tell foes, depending on how you feel. Um, and it's the off season, and so I'm currently icing my leg, so no kick this week, but I'll certainly be making a kick in honor of whichever free agent kicker gets the most cash in next week's episode.
It will be Brandon Aubrey.
Yeah, that's true. I think he'll stay with Dallas if there's a
Yeah.
guy who changes. Maybe it's Eddie Pinheiro, reset the market already, and I don't know. Anyway, all things to look forward to, but for now, peace.
Buckets? No, wrong show. Wrong show.